In addition to the techniques inherited from our predecessors, the time has come where it seems there's nothing that cannot be expressed with time and money, taking modern technology into account. Manga that are fearless and challenging are overwhelmingly popular. How do you imagine such a sensation? It would be reckless, but worth it. Such a challenge will set your heart ablaze, no matter the outcome.
It's been more than a decade since Attack on Titan began publication, with its anime sweeping the world since 2013. It's evolved into one of the most gripping stories ever told in fiction, as the ideas that Hajime Isayama offered in such a grand epic from September 2009 to April 2021 has left a mark on media. Even people who don't watch anime or are interested in it know what Attack on Titan is. But being here to talk about the anime, we are not. Personally, I've already talked about it with as much praise as I can give. In this two-part essay, I'm going to talk about an anomaly that's considered to be so infamous that some say it's one of the worst things ever produced. Some claim that it has nearly stained and ruined the reputation of the story that everyone knew and loved. I am going to talk about the 2015 live-action duology from Toho Studios, directed by legendary tokusatsu filmmaker Shinji Higuchi. While live-action anime and manga tend to get a bad rap, it's not uncommon to see these adaptations with a reception that is confusing, to say the least. Many have said that these are movies that have nothing worth of value, hold no significance, are just a waste of space, and should forever be forgotten. But why? Is it because of how they deviate from the source material? Could it be how they're presented? Or do people just not get it? In short, it's not what people think of when it comes to Attack on Titan, which is fair for plenty of reasons. The first season of the anime was the only thing that was on the minds of most fans during the summer of 2015, especially as manga sales were climbing higher and higher. Safe to say, there were already a decent number of people who were either aware of or invested in the story and its universe. And when the films decided to go their own route with things, putting its own spin on the source material, needless to say, fans were disappointed. But is the sheer vitriol truly all that deserving? Deserving of being within the same ranks as, say, Dragon Ball Evolution? Or even Devilman, which was dubbed the worst Japanese film of all time? You see terms get thrown around like bad acting, a poor script, rushed pacing, overly dramatic, bad direction, and terrible special effects. But looking back, 10 years later, do those critiques really stack up? But before I can really dissect why these movies didn't click with people and why they are the way they are, I have to go back. Not back to where the anime started, or when Hajime Isayama got the idea for Attack on Titan, but a part of Japanese pop culture that's not often looked at by enthusiasts. Tokusatsu is a term that literally means special filming, or special effects, depending on who you ask. It normally refers to live-action media that show a heavy use of practical effects, such as miniature buildings, elaborate costumes, puppets or suits made to depict monsters, pyrotechnics, and a multitude of camera tricks. The earliest traces of tokusatsu can date back to the 14th century during Japan's Muromachi period. One of the earliest forms of Japanese theater is no, where performers don costumes and masks of various types to tell stories. No theater normally featured very complex and stylized set pieces, which in addition to its choreography depict classic tales and folklore. One of its defining features being the use of masks to symbolize either a transformation or something non-human. Later on during the Edo period came kabuki, where the costumes became much more elaborate, followed by bunraku, where puppets were used to depict characters. It is during this period where the seeds for what we would know as tokusatsu would be planted, as this era of theater would greatly influence the dawn of the Japanese film industry. The ways of visual storytelling were starting to evolve, and while many of the efforts made in Japan's early days of cinema would become lost during numerous conflicts including World War II, the earliest surviving tokusatsu film that many scholars point to is a 1926 silent feature titled A Page of Madness, that featured a decent amount of camera tricks and its most memorable iconography being its use of masks from the aforementioned era of theater. In the midst of their war efforts during World War II, the Japanese Imperial Army had filmmaker Eiji Tsuburaya help produce propaganda films that normally utilized miniature fighter planes and ships. And despite his distaste towards Japan's war efforts and the fact that he was being exploited, Tsuburaya was able to innovate numerous filming techniques involving superimposition and trick photography, inspired by the likes of Willis O'Brien's work on 1933's King Kong. Then in 1954, Tsuburaya would use his experience to help bring life to the one film that would end up revolutionizing the industry for the time. The original Godzilla was an ambitious accomplishment, experimenting with technology that was still relatively new, yet somehow perfecting it with the limitations they were working with. Miniatures were crafted in a way that complemented a heavy monster suit that was proven to be hell for its wearer Haruo Nakajima, all while manipulating the lighting and the frame rate of the camera to evoke an awe-inspiring sense of scale and terror from a visual standpoint. Godzilla is a movie that is remembered for lots of reasons, being a metaphor for the destructive power of military science. But the one thing that Godzilla would do is not only spawn a massive film franchise that still runs to this day, but ultimately help pioneer its techniques to essentially kickstart a new genre, that being Kaiju Eiga, meaning monster movies. Since Godzilla, there had been plenty of Japanese giant monster media, from Rodan to Mothra to Gamera to War of the Gargantuas. While many of these stories can be just fun and goofy, there are plenty that use its principles and fundamentals to tell very compelling narratives that reflect our world and ideal values. Daimajin is a tale of mankind's destructive greed and ambition. Ultraman is a series that reminds us about the value of all living things. Now, obviously, giant monsters and giant heroes aren't the only thing to come out of tokusatsu, as plenty of media like The Last War are special effects heavy thrillers that are just beautifully crafted from a storytelling and visual standpoint. And on top of that, there were stories that ask what it means to be human, like Kamen Rider, the importance of companionship and camaraderie as seen in Go Ranger. Over the years, tokusatsu has transformed so much and has remained relevant to this day, with select shows receiving new entries and adaptations on a yearly basis. The stories tokusatsu is capable of telling resonate with audiences because of what they have to say about our world, who we are as people, and what we can strive for despite their low-budget nature. This media has gone on to inspire the likes of Guillermo del Toro, Hideaki Anno, Tim Burton, Sam Raimi, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, James Gunn, Stanley Kubrick. In time, auteurs were able to connect with these types of films. While tokusatsu is important in the history of Japanese pop culture, it is still relatively niche amongst the average enthusiasts of the nation's media from outside. Manga and anime is usually what's more marketable and gets all the acclaim, though there have been cases where some refuse to invest their time into a particular form of media because it reminds them of something that they believe is inferior. Whether it's the flashy costumes or the mere presence of a micro-budget, tokusatsu has this stigma that people can't seem to shake off. Outsiders tend to point to things like Power Rangers or some of the classic Godzilla films from the Showa era as a sort of benchmark for quality. And not a high benchmark, I should add, as that, unfortunately, is all that the general public knows about tokusatsu from a surface-level westward perspective. As one could guess, this same baseline has been used to criticize the Attack on Titan movies, which in turn says something, part of the disconnect that occurred between viewers and the films stemmed from an unwillingness to properly engage with the media in question. You may have noticed how whenever anyone makes the dreaded Power Rangers or Godzilla comparison, nobody points to a particular season or film that could be the reason for this stigma, which then opens up another revelation. People are more than willing to group media together regardless of actual quality and nuance, without an attempt to engage or understand. But with that out of the way, let's talk about ISAYAMA for a moment. I'm sure this is a man who needs no introduction. Ever since he was young, ISAYAMA always had a fascination with things that were giant. This fascination would also lead into his interest in Kaiju Eiga, specifically films like Godzilla vs. Biollante, Mothra, Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, and The War of the Gargantuas. ISAYAMA was infatuated with the idea of beings that were larger than life itself, creatures that remind us of just how small we really are, and that in comparison they are seen as gods, whether they are good, evil, or neither. ISAYAMA would go on to use these concepts to shape what we would know as Attack on Titan, starting with his one-shot in 2006, normally referred to as Attack on Titan Chapter 0, where 100 years into the future, mankind lives in isolation, away from giant man-eating humanoids called Titans who were brought to life thanks to the mankind destruction operation. Whether to push humanity to the next step in evolution, to weaponize, or for some other demented purpose is unknown. The story features Japanese characters in a Japanese setting, with more modern architecture than what's seen in the manga that would follow. While a rough-looking one-shot from an artist who has yet to really reach his potential, it's a very enjoyable read, and it's interesting to see which concepts would later make it into the manga that we are familiar with. It wouldn't be until 2009, when Attack on Titan began publication in Basatsu Shonen magazine, where it would become a hit. People caught on to the story of Eren Yeager, who sought vengeance upon the Titans for being the reason humanity is trapped in these giant walls, only to be led through a series of events that ultimately changes his worldview, as the very world around him is not what he thought it was. Aside from having a compelling lead and a memorable cast of characters, the manga has been widely discussed when it comes to its themes relating to how war affects people, and how violence is capable of ramifications beyond anyone's understanding, as well as what people are willing to do as a means to survive and or achieve some form of peace for what they believe is the greater good. And of course, there's the monster fights. What's not to love about it? These fights in many regards are an homage to Ultraman mixed with ISAYAMA's love for mixed martial arts. But long before Attack on Titan even reached its peak, and before an anime was even thought of, back when it was still only seen through manga pages, ISAYAMA was about to experience a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity: Attack on Titan on the big screen. The earliest rumblings of a live-action Attack on Titan movie came out in the year 2011, 2 years after the manga officially began publication, which at that point, being October 2011, was on its 26th chapter. Toho, the company that is most famously known for the Godzilla series, made the announcement that they had plans for a live-action adaptation of Hajime Isayama's manga, scheduled for a 2013 release. And considering that this was before an anime was announced, it's highly possible that Toho saw potential in Attack on Titan becoming a monstrous multimedia franchise. This live-action project was to be directed by Tetsuya Nakashima, who's mainly known for his award-winning and compellingly dramatic features such as Kamikaze Girls and Memories of Matsuko. Given his experience in depicting human drama, Nakashima seemed to be a pretty good fit for the project. Though Nakashima hasn't really done a lot of special effects work in his career, especially for something that would be as big as Attack on Titan. In that same month of October 2011, there was a casting call for performers to play Titans, and panicked civilians in a shopping district. This was where it was discovered that this version of Attack on Titan was to take place in modern-era Japan. While other specifics about the production are unknown at the time of this recording, it wasn't until the following year in 2012 where Nakashima stepped out of the project due to what was said to be creative differences. However, this actually tells us something that not a lot of us would consider, and it is that Attack on Titan is such an overly ambitious thing to try and adapt, especially as a Japanese film production. The thing is, Japanese movies normally do not have a lot of money. Such is the case with the live-action Keshan movie, which only cost 600 million yen to make, which was about $5.5 million at the time. In order to bring something like Attack on Titan to the big screen would be ridiculously expensive, and would require lots of resources for gigantic set pieces, costumes, props, everything. It's even been said that numerous directors turned down the offer to adapt Attack on Titan because it would have been impossible to accomplish. It's also very telling even when the anime itself would have a lot of production issues during its run, but that wasn't until one director stepped up and decided to take on this beast. Ladies and gentlemen, Shinji Higuchi. Born in Shinjuku on December 22, 1965, Higuchi grew up watching tokusatsu works like Godzilla and Ultraman, and became a lifelong fan of the medium. The works of both Eiji Tsuburaya and Tadayoshi Nakano served as a huge influence for him, and Higuchi was inspired to become a filmmaker in his future. After graduating high school in 1984, Higuchi's first official filmmaking gigs were on the sets of Zero and Sayonara Jupiter as a production assistant. But it was also where he would meet special effects director Koichi Kawakita, who would go on to direct the special effects for a good chunk of Godzilla films from the Heisei era. Kawakita would serve as a mentor for Higuchi in his career. After Sayonara Jupiter, Higuchi would then work on The Return of Godzilla, where he would then be mentored by special effects director Tadayoshi Nakano, who he had met on the sets of 1980's Deathquake and 1981's Imperial Navy. Like Eiji Tsuburaya, Nakano was another big name in the realm of tokusatsu, being responsible for the special effects work in the Godzilla films throughout the 70s, as well as other classics like Prophecies of Nostradamus. Something noteworthy about Higuchi's time working on Return of Godzilla would actually result in something that would help the film turn out better from a visual standpoint. Higuchi suggested the idea that the monsters should be shot from lower angles as a means to evoke a great sense of scale and terror. The result was nothing short of astonishing, as this philosophy would eventually find itself in his later projects, including Attack on Titan. Thanks to his experience working with big names like Nakano and Kawakita, Higuchi was then brought on to direct Shusuke Kaneko's Gamera trilogy from the 90s, considered to be some of the greatest tokusatsu films ever made, not only because of Kaneko's phenomenal directing, but what really helped put it all together were the special effects by Higuchi. All the monsters and miniatures really give so much life to the film, and Higuchi became a big deal. It's no wonder why Gamera Guardian of the Universe would inspire Attack on Titan, in that the terror of the Titans were influenced by the Gyaos birds. After several tokusatsu productions throughout the 2000s, we get to another one of Higuchi's biggest works, and that is Giant God Warrior Appears in Tokyo in 2012. A live-action short film that serves as a prequel to Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which flaunts an impressive blend of CGI with puppetry and miniatures. In that same year, Higuchi would also direct The Floating Castle, showing that he is a versatile director capable of doing not just smaller-scaled special effects pieces, but can even pull off a larger-scaled epic. It is also worth noting that a good number of the people who worked on The Floating Castle would eventually find themselves in Attack on Titan, like cinematographer Shoji Ohara, VFX artist Toshio Miike, VFX producer Tetsuya Oya, VFX supervisor Atsuki Sato, and special effects director KATSURO ONOUE. Just by looking at his directorial efforts, we can see that Shinji Higuchi's style of filmmaking is all about scope. He emphasizes the sheer scale of the stories he tells, almost as if they are legends, which is further emphasized with giant and elaborate set pieces and how animated his characters are. All of these traits would deem Higuchi as the perfect director for Attack on Titan. In fact, Higuchi is actually a fan of Attack on Titan, and was actually caught up with the manga at this particular moment. Higuchi recognized Isayama's love for tokusatsu, as well as how grand and breathtaking the manga was. We now move to Tomohiro Machyama, the man who Tom Salver is based on. Machyama is a writer and Japanese film critic, one that Isayama happens to look up to. Additionally, he is an anti-war activist, and Attack on Titan was something he was willing to work with, as he connected with the manga as well. This live-action project would also be his only screenwriting credit.
They didn't know how to adapt it, so they asked an idiot like me if I would lend a hand. I felt like Bilbo from The Hobbit when he was asked to fight the dragon.
With the combined efforts of Higuchi and Machyama, they had put together a 90-page manuscript that adapted the first 3 volumes of Attack on Titan, from the fall of Shiganshina to the Battle of Trost. The two firmly believed that they could adapt the world of Attack on Titan and stay true to it, though they were willing to make changes that would on one hand make their version stand out, while also not sacrificing too much on the other. One change that was considered was to have Levi be the main character, as he was easily the most popular character at the time. Higuchi and Machyama undoubtedly had the fans on their minds. Upon completion of their first draft, Higuchi and Machyama took it and pitched it to the man himself, Hajime Isayama. However, things took quite a turn after Isayama looked at their draft. In short, Isayama liked it, but he didn't like that their draft was essentially a copy-paste of his work. In Isayama's words, he encouraged them to go with a different story, as it would allow more room for creativity. Now, as insane as that sounds, this feedback actually makes sense. For starters, the anime had already begun airing at this point, and that was already telling the manga's story, so it would be odd for another adaptation of Attack on Titan to tell the exact same story at the exact same time. Another point is that this would allow Higuchi and Machyama to push their creativity by not restricting themselves to only the manga, as there is plenty of room on a filmmaking standpoint to be had. Mind you, Attack on Titan is very ambitious with its contents. Despite his feedback, Isayama was more than happy to work with Higuchi and Machyama and was brought on board for creative decisions. In addition to Hajime Isayama, was his editor Shintaro Kawakubo, as well as special effects director KATSURO Inoue, modeling director Yoshihiro Nishimura, writer Yusuke Watanabe, and producers Yoshihiro Sato and Akihiro Yamauchi. They all worked with Higuchi and Machyama to create a new world of Attack on Titan from the ground up. One that has the same familiarity in terms of characters, world building, scope, all while being unique enough to stand on its own. With the addition of looking to films such as Kihachi Okamoto's Battle of Okinawa, Ishiro Honda's The War of the Gargantuas, Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaa the Valley of the Wind, and Gareth Evans' The Raid for influence.
For this film, it was important to get a feel for the world it was set in.
Adapting a work from one medium to another is like translating a language. Sometimes an exact literal translation doesn't always work, as it potentially puts the intent of what's being translated at great risk of being lost. Hence why it's called adaptation. You're taking one thing and adapting it into a different form. One has to understand why the original is effective and convey it in a new way that stays true to its original meaning. This was the philosophy when it came to this production, as Isayama said to Higuchi,
"Feel free to make it whatever you can, and make it something that is interesting. Something that only live action could do. Make it your own thing."
One of the first of big changes that were made was to convert Attack on Titan's well-known European-like setting to Japan, specifically a post-apocalyptic Japan. If anything, this change was made more out of necessity, as it would serve as the foundation for the themes and world building that would come to follow. While the original fantasy-like setting for Attack on Titan was beautiful, this new post-apocalyptic setting incorporated a postmodern blend of agricultural and industrial aesthetics that almost make this future tangible, as if the possibilities of this world becoming our very own is believable. This is especially conveyed through concept art by Evangelion character designer Yoshiyuki Sadamoto, who successfully captures the beauty of Attack on Titan in a way that really encapsulates the feeling of the source material's landscapes. This is further shown by the production's filming locations in Gukanjima, as well as Ibaraki and Kumamoto Prefecture, with some additional sequences in Toho Studio 8. These settings show that despite how broken the world can be, it is still full of life, and something about that is very uplifting. Whether it is the war-torn environment of Gukanjima that is being reclaimed by nature, the breathtaking beauty of the valleys of Kumamoto Prefecture, or the liveliness of Ibaraki Prefecture, which director Higuchi actually grew up in for some time after moving from Tokyo at a young age.
Isayama stated that he didn't really want us to mind the setting in the original manga that much. The only thing that he wanted to have us keep true was the world in which these giant titans eat humans. That was really the extent to which he wanted us to stay true to the manga.
Another change to complement this new setting was to have the soldiers use military transports instead of horses, as the latter would have been too costly and timely for their actors and stunt performers to perfect. The transports were designed in different scales, 1:1 for in-person shots, 1/6 for wide shots, and 1/9 for shots with Titan actors and other scale models such as the Outer Wall, which was built as a partial 1:1 set piece for the human actors, a 1/9 model for the Titan actors and other miniatures, and finally, a full 1/25th model for scenes with the colossal Titan. While the use of horses in the manga was to convey just how technologically distant the characters were, the addition of military transports in this new setting conveys an element of classism, which goes into how the world is divided in these films. Within Wall Sotono, the outermost wall, lie the agricultural districts, mostly consisting of farmlands, vast and open fields, and villages. Within the middle wall, Wall Nakano, which may or may not be named after Tadayoshi Nakano, are the commercial districts, where it's fairly advanced, but neither too modern or traditional. And finally, there's the innermost wall, Wall Okuno, consisting of government districts, skyscrapers, and so forth, being the most technologically advanced area of this walled civilization. The final draft of the script even mentions that at the very center is the Tower of Babel, where the government runs their operations, plotting what they can to ensure what they call stability. Additionally, Higuchi had the idea to diversify the military uniforms by giving each of the branches their own distinct look. The Scout Regiment faithfully adapts the uniforms from the manga, the Garrison is more so based off of Japanese World War II uniforms, as those in the military police bear a striking resemblance to the SS officers of Nazi Germany. But now that this is a story set in Japan, it would need to feature Japanese characters with Japanese names, again, as a necessity that complements the setting and world building. It was also decided that due to the actors they would eventually work with, the characters' ages were increased from mid-teens to around their 20s.
The characters themselves are the same. There isn't much change except for the appearance, of course. It's not a standalone piece, where it has nothing to do with the source material. It's actually very close. The characters that they represent, the characteristics, the personalities, they're extremely close.
And now, we get to the fun part. In the early stages of pre-production, the filmmakers kicked around the idea of having the Titans be portrayed through CGI, as seen in concept art by Koji Tajima and sketches by Shinji Higuchi, but was quickly decided against as it would have taken more time and resources.
We thought about having the Titans be computer generated, but that would have taken up too much time and money.
We used motion capture technology to animate them. The result was an uncomfortably smooth, uncanny gait. I couldn't get too attached. There's way too many Titans. In order to animate so many, no matter how many excellent animators you gathered, it'd still be difficult.
Thus, it was decided that they were going to incorporate a heavy amount of tokusatsu in this production. This included having all the Titans be played by real actors, with the exception of a 2-meter-tall colossal titan animatron. However, Higuchi wasn't just going to put a tokusatsu skin over Attack on Titan. He was willing to push its limits with CG. Higuchi understands that tokusatsu is a hard sell for many. A lot of people tend to associate it with cheap kid stuff. So as a means to help make Attack on Titan more visually appealing and modern, Higuchi came up with a new way to take tokusatsu to the next level through a technique he calls hybrid. This hybrid technique was to shoot scenes with as many tokusatsu elements as possible and enhance them with CGI in post-production. Higuchi was a man who deeply cared about the art of tokusatsu, and he was going to do everything he could to make something fresh and new with a long-lasting appeal, despite the limitations that come with a Japanese film production.
It seemed ridiculous to try and pull off such big special effects scenes, but techniques had made steady progress. Because of our long preparation, what seemed insurmountable was now within the realms of possibility. We brought our plans into reality in this film.
It looked like all the pieces were coming together, as Attack on Titan would have a budget of 3 billion yen, making it one of the most expensive Japanese film productions ever, which officially began on May 11th, 2014, and ended on August 17th of the same year, with post-production wrapping up on June 9th, 2015. The first official look we have ever gotten for this live-action production came in the form of a commercial for the Subaru Forester in January 2014, just several months before production finally began. It was odd to have this be the very first thing to promote this project. Though as strange as it may sound, the commercial itself is actually rather entertaining, especially for the Titans that appear in it. There were 2 normal Titans played by Hiroko Yashiki and Yoshio Komatsu, with only some digital effects. And at the end, a very impressive looking Colossal Titan animatron, also with some digital effects. The Titans were definitely the highlights of this short promo, and looking at the behind the scenes of the making of this commercial, there was a good amount of promise in place, especially as this was a submission to 2014's AdFest. That also boosted Subaru to be the #1 seller in SUVs at the time. However, some people really started to have questions when in November of the same year, Toho released character posters of the main cast. We got Eren, Mikasa, Armin, Sasha, Jean, Hanji, also known as Hans, which is how the character is normally marketed, though they do call her Hanji in the actual films. But in addition to these characters from the manga, there was Sanagi, Lil, Fuku-shuu, Hyana, Soda, Kubal, and more infamously, Shikishima. It's become popular belief that the filmmakers didn't include Levi because his name would have been hard to pronounce. But that's just a severe oversimplification. In actuality, it's so the world building is more consistent, as everything has taken on a Japanese identity, and a name like Levi wouldn't have made it very consistent. Now you're probably wondering, if this is the case, then why have characters like Eren, Armin, Sasha, and Jean? Obviously, you're gonna want to keep the more important characters in the manga's core cast, but there are actually a decent amount of Japanese citizens with those names, as Machyama pointed out in an interview. It's not so much that Levi would have been hard to pronounce, especially considering its Hebrew origins, but more so, why would he have that kind of name here?
We had a lot of fans saying, Levi doesn't appear so I won't watch it. It was an extraordinarily tough choice. We only finalized it last minute. It was really difficult.
We did think about the possibilities of including Levi in the film, but what we wanted to show in this movie is someone who confronts his stance against the main protagonist, whether mentally or physically, and Levi shouldn't have to carry the burden of that role. After discussing it with ISAYAMA, we added a tingle of Levi's presence in him.
This was everybody's first sign that this was going to be very different. A lot of people were confused, to say the least, but with everything I've mentioned earlier, it's pretty understandable as to why they'd go this route. There were also people questioning why the cast was Japanese. Well, the answer may not be so apparent, but it is rather simple, as it has to do with the fact that this is a Japanese film production. Also, it is uncertain if the masses would want a Japanese film that widely features Caucasian actors, given their history with such. Though as more trailers and posters were being pumped out, they gave off the impression that this was actually going to be a pretty solid story, with some entertaining acting performances and some pretty fantastic special effects for a Japanese production. But even though there was a lot of confusion and some uncertainty from the public, a lot of people were kind of missing the big picture here. This was the first time we were getting a tokusatsu feature of this kind of scale, almost a decade in the making. This was something very special. These films had a lot of things going for them that people weren't exactly seeing. Aside from Attack on Titan being a very recognizable IP, the first movie actually had its premiere in Hollywood on July 14th, 2015, making it the first time any tokusatsu film had a Hollywood premiere since Godzilla Final Wars. It looked as if there was a lot of genuine faith in this project, and it was clear that the filmmakers and everyone involved, including Higuchi and Isayama, were very proud of what they had. This was a colossal moment, even as this premiere was met with a good amount of praise, receiving props for being so ambitious, and was all around a fun time according to most people who attended. Obviously, this all changed when the movies came out.
I just wanted the Titans to eat the stupid kids already.
Upon their respective releases, reactions to the Attack on Titan movies were rather mixed, especially for the first film, as not a lot of people were aware of or even bothered with the second, fortunately. Basically, general moviegoers were really only in it for the action and special effects, and nothing else, as they didn't find other elements such as the storytelling to be as impressive. Fans, however, didn't take too kindly to their presence, criticizing the deviations from the source material, which was something that Tomohiro Machyama predicted beforehand.
Fans of the anime will get rather heated over the changes. It was important for us to reach out to the original author about changing his characters.
This is especially the case when you look at the Western fandom, which makes up a majority of Attack on Titan's fanbase. A lot of people were very harsh on them, so harsh that it seemed like people were just ready to pick these films apart. In other words, hate watching. Hajime Isayama himself was confused about the reception.
I want to take in the favorable opinions, and also the indignant ones, if only to understand them.
It was even enough to upset modeling director Yoshihiro Nishimura.
Everyone says Hollywood movies are great. Well, then they can go right ahead and watch nothing but Hollywood movies. Movies with high budgets and a lot of advanced techniques are great, aren't they? Especially movies with high budgets. You should watch movies that have been hit in the face with stacks of cash. People who like to compare Hollywood and Japanese movies really enjoy that sort of thing, right?
Director Shinji Higuchi had this to say about a review from Eiga Hiho.
If the experts had praised me, I wouldn't have known what to do. But this makes me feel better. Anyway, who's the idiot who sent this guy an invitation to the preview?
Higuchi would apologize for the comment, as it was only posted in a private Facebook post that was then leaked.
Who I'm really outraged at are the blockheads in charge of publicity, who send preview invitations to people who don't deserve to be shown private screenings. Maybe I'm the real blockhead.
Hanji's actress, SATOMI ISHIHARA, responded to the criticism regarding these films in a rather respectful manner.
Movies can change people's perceptions depending on the environment they grew up in, the information, their knowledge, physical condition, and mental balance. I believe that any opinion or impression is correct.
Suspecting that the marketing was to blame, Isayama suggested that Toho put out a new trailer for both movies that would paint a more honest picture for what audiences could properly expect. This trailer would be packed with highlights showing off the film's glorious action and special effects sequences, making it the definitive Attack on Titan trailer. While Higuchi and Nishimura have shared their thoughts regarding the critical reception of the first movie with comments one may see as unprofessional, it is easy to understand their response. It must be soul-crushing to see something you've been greatly passionate about get slammed without a second thought. There's no denying that movies are purely made with the blood, sweat, and tears of hundreds if not thousands, and by the time marketing was being pushed for the second film, the damage was already done. But it wasn't all negativity. At the Tokyo premiere of Attack on Titan Part 2 End of the World, the movie's lead actor, HARUMA, who plays Eren, expressed his gratitude for not only being part of such an ambitious project, but for working with his co-stars, the production team, and director Shinji Higuchi.
It's a very powerful film. It was the power of the director who led the staff and kept us moving forward.
The sentiment moved Higuchi to tears, Attack on Titan was something personal to him. As for the North American distribution that was helmed by Funimation, despite giving them a very generous localization treatment, including a lavish Hollywood premiere at the Grauman's Egyptian Theater with an after-party showcasing behind-the-scenes footage, it unfortunately didn't really help matters either. A copy with defective subtitles was mailed to dozens of theaters across America that were either fixed or unfixed, depending on what theater you were in, leading to refunds and the short-lived "I've been waiting for this day" meme, named after the line that was frozen on screen. Later on, Funimation uploaded a whole minute-and-a-half recap of the first movie on their YouTube channel as a means to remedy the mishap, and the company would proceed to hardcode their subtitles with every theatrical release moving forward. But even with all of this said, the films weren't exactly box office bombs, as they would go on to accumulate more than 5 billion yen, which was about $46 million at the time. While the films managed to get Toho their money back, it wasn't quite enough, as Part 1 would earn about 3.7 billion yen, or about $30.8 million, and Part 2's earnings would be significantly less, bringing in 1.3 billion yen, or about $15.2 million, showing a more than 50% drop in revenue between films. Furthermore, while the first film had a big opening weekend, raking in about 600 million yen, or about $500 million, the second would open with 327 million yen, or about $2.7 million. Additionally, Part 2 was released during Silver Week, where numerous public holidays were taking place, which meant that audiences had more free time than usual. And finally, while the films gathered more than 5 billion yen total, only the first movie was expected to pull in that 5 billion yen, ultimately meaning that these movies underperformed. But I must ask again, was all of this hatred really justified? Was it all just blind fan vitriol? Let us find out next time. I want to thank you all very much for watching. I understand this was very long, but if you were able to watch it all the way through, it truly means a lot. I also want to give a shout out to Fuku-shuu on Tumblr for preserving a lot of the information present in this video from articles, interviews, and so forth. Fuku-shuu also helps moderate Team Mizuhara across social media, as well as SNK News on Tumblr. I will provide links in the description, as well as other additional sources used in this video essay, so feel free to check them out. And since you've already made it here, if you like what you see, feel free to support the channel on Patreon, where you can subscribe to all sorts of perks, including my Discord server, early access to videos, and exclusive content, so consider becoming a patron today. And of course, I want to give a huge shout out to my editor Cole for being more than willing to take on this giant beast of a video.
Is it over?
Just one more to go.
You serious?
Yep.
What do you mean there's another one?
That being said, feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys next time.
Everyone says Hollywood movies are great. Well, then they can go right ahead and watch nothing but Hollywood movies. Movies with high budgets and a lot of advanced techniques are great, aren't they? Especially movies with high budgets. You should watch movies that have been hit in the face with stacks of cash. People who like to compare Hollywood and Japanese movies really enjoy that sort of thing, right?